Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Bettor Edge. Visit bettoredge.com today or grab the app in the iOS App Store. Register yourself. Use code SPOTTRACK at registration. Grab $20 and get gambling. Eliminate the VIG, set the prices, set the bets, go head-to-head, create competitions. It's unique, it's different, it's safer, it's reliable. It's bettoredge.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Monday, July 21st. We're in that lull, but that lull comes with lots of stories. So it's going to be a bit of a six-pack today. We're going to bounce around quite a bit. Little Scottie Scheffler, little WNBA, little baseball, little football, and maybe some other notable notes to finish this thing off on a Monday as we head towards NFL training camps, the second half of the Major League Baseball season, the end of the major season with professional golf, and plenty more. But you know what's happening this time of year. You're thinking about your fantasy team. You're thinking about maybe some baseball playoffs, maybe even the start of hockey and basketball for those diehards in that neck of the woods. But a little bit cooled off here in those terms. We do have some major money to talk about, respectively, though, across this six-pack, and that's next. All right, Dan Soemann is here. I'm going to put him on the spot, and he's not going to like it. Here's topic du jour number one, Dan. WNBA money. I very rarely do this and kind of get down the rabbit hole with some of these conversations in the hot stoves, but there's some real numbers to this. There's some real conversation to be had. It's obviously a sport that I'm following closely in terms of the year to year, the salary to salary. So I'm well aware of the actual notables that are out there. It's a profit loss situation. You know, this is a startup company, even though it's 25 plus years in the bank at this point in time. And it's a league that's having a moment. All right. If the buy-in 2 years ago for a franchise was 50 and now it's 250, and the valuation for a team was 25, but now it's 500, right? It's just logical that the players should be getting a little bit more of a piece of the pie, right? And if I tell you, Dan, that the piece of the pie right now is 9.4% of the revenue versus every other league imaginable at or near the 50-50 mark, do you have an inkling of a thought here before I start to get down my on top of my soapbox with this thing?
Not specifically, no. I mean, go ahead and you can kind of lead me around.
Look, the current CBA runs through 2027. They're gonna max these minimum salaries out or maximum salaries out at about $83,000. So that's where this thing is headed through the course of this current CBA. That does afford them 9% of the revenue. And by the way, that aligns with the TV stuff. So right now they're on like a $45 million TV package with ION and CBS and things like that. Some ESPN networks. That's about to times 5. Okay. There's a $200 million TV deal sitting out there right now that's going to take this league from the red to the black almost immediately. Okay. If they lost 40 million, they're going to gain 115 at some point in time here over the next 3 years. So they're starting the process early because, quite frankly, they're negotiating right now. They're in discussions, and the commissioner of the league has been out there publicly, going on talk shows, obviously getting in front of the microphone herself, being candid about the fact that they know that major changes are coming. And now that L word is starting to come out as well, the one we know is forthcoming in Major League Baseball, right? If these players have to lock out, they're willing to do so. The stars of the league have already come out and said that's going to be a possibility, maybe even a likelihood. And the commissioner has acknowledged that, not unlike Rob Manfred in baseball. So that's sort of why I'm bringing you into this conversation right now. Is I think we're starting to have two different but competing conversations here with these leagues. The different being Major League Baseball has been around for 300 years, feels like, and the WNBA just hasn't. And they haven't had this moment. They haven't had this moment where they're having to find bigger arenas to sell tickets because there's polarizing players, because there's storylines. We know the Caitlin Clark effect. We know the Angel Reese stuff. We know how things have gone in the past. And there's a window here. There's an opportunity. There's a bubble. So I guess the easy question to you, Dan, is do you think that the players should be able to capitalize right now on the very early stages of this bubble, understanding that the league as a whole is going to slow their growth if they do this? Let's just say the players are able to jump up at the 40% of the revenue. Okay. The salary cap quadruples, which I think is probably realistic. It's like 1.5 million, the salary cap right now for a 15-person roster in the WNBA. Let's just say that gets to 5 million, okay, to start the next CBA whenever the negotiations get to the finish line. And then the players end up getting around 40% of the revenue, including that new TV deal and all the merch that's getting obviously tossed left and right out of stores. Do you think that that is the right way to do it? If I put it in this context, there's a startup out in Silicon Valley, okay, that has a good idea, has a good premise, has a good mission, but obviously is coming in with either investors or, stunt money or whatever it's going to take, petty cash. And they know that the second they go and hire a staff of 50 with any kind of worth, it's going to sink them. They're going into the red because of the $100,000 salaries left and right. That's what the WNBA has been doing up until this point, and now is still doing for the course of the next 2 to 3 seasons with this current CBA. Do you think that they have to bet on the players that the Caitlin Clark effect, the Paige Beckers effect, the Angel Reese effect, etc., are going to be able to keep up this momentum so that as the player revenue grows, the league revenue grows even more so that the umbrella can all trickle back down and keep everybody safe, happy, and comfortable and reliable? Is that the right way to do this? Is to bet on the players and actually go above and beyond with their salaries and hope that that everything else sort of works out and economically that way?
From my point of view, I think both sides are kind of doing it right. I mean, the Women's Players Association seems to be pretty vocal and aggressive with their stance. And as they should be, trying to capitalize on this window of stardom. Now, I don't want to project a decade out from now, but we've seen at least a little bit of fragility with the Caitlin Clark effect. I know there's other stars. I'm not trying to discount that, but I'm not as involved in what in the WNBA. So from somebody who's like maybe like a normie on this, if you will, like I see a lot of it still attached to Caitlin Clark in terms of the fragility. We see her get injured, ticket prices go down, All-Star game is affected, etc. So that's not to discount the other players, but I'm just trying to say that they have a generational player that can carry them for a decade. I think they want to capitalize on that now, not really knowing what the future beyond that holds. But I think the league itself should I think the other side is right in their stance to say maybe this is fragile and we don't want to just give you everything you're asking for. Obviously, it's negotiations. I'm trying to overly simplify it here. So,
yeah, and I'm reading a lot to try to understand the behind the scenes economics of this, because obviously I sit with the salary cap world and the player salaries themselves, and I understand exactly how that stuff is operating. And there's a lot being attached to the valuation part of it, right? Like the Sportico valuations, the Forbes valuations, they've quadrupled, and rightfully so.
For sure.
The expansion has been super plentiful. The Golden State franchise is the big one right now. There's 4 more teams coming, two in the next couple of 18 months or so. So expansion helps. Okay, that is the revenue stream that they're banking on. That is where they're taking some of this TV money right now and saying we can build out to bigger cities, to smarter cities, to basketball towns, and try to use that approach as sort of our haymaker. But that's adding more players, that's adding more everything. So you're thinning the pot with this point by doing that, even though expansion is adding revenue, creating better values for all the franchises. And you're going to have a lot of people, especially a lot of journalistic type people, look at the valuations and say, these owners have this money. It's tough to say that, right? It's tough to say Jerry Jones doesn't have $10 billion,
right?
Even though that's what the Dallas Cowboys are worth. Okay. Now there's a world where he can go and get that tomorrow if he so chooses, or some percentage of that with sales, as we're seeing many of these big owners do, sell off minority stakes, have corporations sort of buy in. And maybe that is the next step for the WNBA. Maybe the big part of the CBA is, instead of having these NBA owned teams, should we be looking at corporations to start to back this thing a little bit more, so that minority stakes can become a part of this, and we can level up that way versus trying to take huge swings and bank on the fact that Caitlin Clark's hamstring and Achilles and things like that are going to be fine for the next 12 to 15 years, because that is a lot, and it's incorrect to put it all on her. But let's be honest about what the numbers look like, what the gambling numbers look like, what the TV numbers look like surrounding her specifically. So,
the rocket ship
absolutely
trajectory of the league has been led by her. That was my only point. I don't want to discount any of the other players.
And it's not fair to the Tarazis and the Sue Birds and the Kelsey Plums and all these players in the past, even AJ Wilson Kersley, who is the 3-time MVP. It's not fair to them, but for whatever reason, and you can speculate and do what you got to do with that. For whatever reason, things have amplified because of Caitlin Clark. And you can complain about it, but you should also capitalize on it at the same time, sure. Right? Because everything can happen because of her right now. And her wearing that T-shirt at the All-Star game that unfortunately she wasn't able to participate in is only going to make this conversation 97,000 times louder. And that's where we are today. Now, the conversation is going to be, why is Caitlin Clark only making $70,000 when her stake, when her popularity, when her polarization is as big as we have in sports right now? Okay. It is a multi-million dollar platform that she has been given / has given to herself. In that regard alone, something has to give here. So expansion is certainly the right idea. We've talked about that with all the big leagues across the board. And I don't think anybody's stopping. The NFL is expanding globally. Baseball is expanding both globally and I think domestically over the course of the next couple. The NHL is constantly talking about things like that, and they've been sort of the most stagnant of this groups, right? The salary cap really leveled off there through COVID. It's starting to get some kickback, and they've got a really aggressive new CBA that's just been ratified that we're going to get to on this show soon once we have all the nuts and bolts figured out. But that's sort of the model I think that we need to look at. They've changed a lot of things in the NHL for the good in order to be able to take that next step economically so that the players and the escrows and all the things that have been built into the Players Association for a long time in that league can go away and start to improve. So there are some hats to hang on here with this WNBA, but it involves the startup model. It involves this organization saying, we're in a world right now, for whatever reason, that is focused on us more than it's ever been. And with the TV money we have and the streaming money we can obtain, I think ancillary, we got to go after it. So to me, it's not even about turning $70,000 a year into $70 million, because if you're trying to compare NBA and WNBA, just turn this show off now, because you're the wrong market for this. Our site, yes, has every salary for every league, and you can go and put those two things up side by side if you want to, but it's not doing anybody a good. It's not doing justice to any of these conversations. But to take $70,000 a year and quadruple that to start this next CBA, that's probably the right approach. Can we take 9% and make it 36% of the revenue? Let's just start there. And then as revenue continues to build, which you have to bank on it's happening, everybody should be happy. But I think a lot more economics have to happen to the way that teams are owned, the way that sponsorships are built in, partnerships are built in. And obviously, if you can consistently sell out 20,000, seats, that has to happen. Okay. You got to stop getting yourself pigeonholed into smaller venues if the league is dying to grow. And I'm not sure that on a grand scheme that is the case, but all these things have to happen. There's a lot of things lining up properly. So I'm not uncomfortable with the players doing what they're doing right now. I also am not sure it's necessary, I guess is my final thought. I think anybody who follows sports, yourself included, and you do not follow the W. It's not a thing that's a part of your daily schedule or weekly schedule, but you're aware of where the payment structure is for the WNBA, just being an outsider. I'm not sure it's necessary to protest, especially when the life of protesting is so polarizingly negative right now across the board. Sports, non-sports, politics, the world. It's having negative effects when it used to be a really positive thing. I think the jury's out. We all know that these players are having a moment that deserves more compensation. And the last time this happened was college sports. And a lot of smart people came together and kind of made that happen. And it's a mess, but it's better. And that's all I'll say about that. And I think that's probably exactly where we can sort of hope the next 2-3 years of WNBA economics get to. It's not going to be perfect. There's going to be some pain, but doubling, tripling, quadrupling these salaries should not be hard in the grand scheme of things. Not because the cash is available, but because the interest should prove that the cash will be there at the end of the day. And that's a tough thing to rely on. But if you want this league to succeed long term, you have to take major risks like this over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. And if it doesn't work, you're probably going to end up exactly where you were anyway. I think that's right? Sitting on your hands is going to get you to a certain point, and going big can get you to a way bigger point, or it can get you right back down to where you started, which is kind of, average status, a little bit of a loss with some good interest to mix in here and there. So it's a tough situation. I think the commissioner is on board with everything we're talking about here, but it could get ugly. It could be a bit of a standoff here over the next 48 months, and we'll see where it gets to. You good? Did you get your fill of WNBA for the morning?
For sure.
Let's move on. Let's talk some football quickly. TJ Watt gets his extension. It's a massive one. It checks all the boxes in terms of making the agent happy, the player happy, and I think the Pittsburgh Steelers happy. It's 3 years, $123 million new. It's the 108 guaranteed that really sets things apart here. Not because that number in the grand scheme of edge rushers or superstars in the NFL is shocking, but the Pittsburgh Steelers just don't do this. We've mentioned it many times. The structure of how they do their contracts is signing bonus only in terms of their guarantee. And there's been very few, like less than 5 contracts since I've been doing salary cap work with Spot Track here, that the Steelers have broken that tradition for. One of those, by the way, was DK Metcalf this year, who got some fully guaranteed salaries built in his contract. And now Watt gets 3 years fully guaranteed. And it's pretty basic stuff. It's a $40 million signing bonus. It's $44 million total this year. And then flat $32 million base salaries, each of 2026 and 2027, that are fully guaranteed right now out of the gate. So it's $108 million locked in fully over the next 3 seasons for, a player who's going to be 31, 32, and 33 throughout those seasons. So you want to talk about a little bit of a financial risk? That's definitely one, because I'm not going to sit here and say that he's been, fully healthy and fully maximum in his prime on the edge for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But your thoughts on this, and then I want to get into maybe what happens now because this contract exists, Dan.
I don't have too much to say. I mean, it's kind of locking in a prime piece of your defense. We all know the Steelers lean on that. I don't really have too much more. I mean, if it's an overpay in the long run, it's an overpay, but it's also the type of move that I'm constantly preaching across all sports. When you're in your window, or if you think you're in your window and you have especially internal pieces that you need to pay, sometimes you just do it, and sometimes it doesn't work out or look great at the end of the term. But it's a necessary evil in sports today.
Do you think there was significant trade interest this offseason leading up to this contract that possibly amplified this thing a little bit? Do you think there's actual trade value out there that's worth a damn for Pittsburgh to listen to?
Probably something, but if a contract is lingering over that at that age, I would have trouble seeing it as something that they would take super seriously unless it kind of blew them away. But if there was, I don't think it would be too overwhelming of an offer.
You mentioned the window here, and it's kind of where I wanted to go with this conversation anyway, because we know this is all hinging on 1 year of Aaron Rodgers right now, and we have no idea where we go after that. We assume there's going to be something in the 2026 draft available for Pittsburgh. They didn't make that kind of move, at least early on in the 2025 draft. But, the Rodgers signing was always sort of the elephant in the room, and then eventually got to that place. Are we really looking at 1 year here? Because acquiring Jalen Ramsey on this 4-year contract is really just a 1 year guarantee, despite what they had to give up in Minka and some picks. It's a 1 year guarantee to bring in Jalen Ramsey. The Metcalf contract is essentially a 3-year guarantee, kind of locked in. Well, really it's 2, and then we'll see. And then the Watt is a 3-year guarantee. But if I go up and down this roster in terms of the contracts, there's nothing in place in 2028. Okay. I mean, there's barely anything there in 2027. This is a team for 2025 with a little bit of a trickle into 2026 in a few instances. I'm looking at this division, right? That's got a behemoth in Baltimore, a solid Cincinnati team that, we'll talk about in a second here, but certainly solid enough to compete divisionally. And then Cleveland, I don't know, who knows? We're going to have to wait and see on how that all shakes out over the course of the next 6 weeks. But certainly, they're not a team at the bottom from a financial standpoint. They are invested, at least to try attempt to compete this year. Where do the Steelers even fit in 2025 divisionally, let alone in the AFC right now for you?
Honestly, I think I hate to be this guy. I think I've kind of come full circle. I think there's a world that Rodgers overperforms public expectation, and we see the Steelers as a team outright perform typically expectations. Mm-hmm. I should say the last couple of years, especially since they haven't had like a franchise quarterback in the room, but they always do more with less is the point here. And Rodgers now 2 years removed from the injury.
That's right.
I know everyone is writing his obituary already, but I think there's a legit world where in an Arthur Smith-led offense with a nice running game, it's not a super great wide receiver core there for him to work with, but I think there's a world where he's better than a lot of people think he will be. So I personally think that they could be in contention here, or at least for a wild card spot in my mind, right? I mean, I think the Ravens are pretty simply the class of the division. I think I really like the Bengals offense there. I think the defense is still going to struggle big time, which is going to lead to a bunch of tight, high scoring games, which are high variance and could go either way. So there's a chance that they are contending with the Ravens, or there's a chance that they look terrible by the end of the year. So my point of laying those two scenarios out, there's a path that the Steelers sneak into that conversation if Rodgers does look better than people think.
They're a wild card lock for me. Lock. And I don't have to look too far around the AFC to get myself there because of two things. Everything you just said, the Arthur Smith offense, Rodgers, you got to really focus in on the last 8-9 weeks of 2024 with Rodgers, because it's very clear that two things happened. He got comfortable in that offense and he got healthy, because he was looking not great. It was not MVP Aaron Rodgers. It's never going to be MVP Aaron Rodgers. But man, he was consistent. He was reliable. He was finding the end zone. He was being the smartest man in the room, which is, how he's dying to operate all the time. It was there for almost half of the season last year on an absolute dumpster fire Jets season. So if all we have to do is translate that conversation into a situation that was basically held up by a shell of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, who barely got a chance, right? And they still stuck into the postseason last year.
Right.
And now you look at the improvements that were made, and they are stark improvements. Stark, okay, including the draft class. So I don't have to work too hard to get myself to a wild card with this team, assuming that Rodgers is healthy, assuming that Arthur Smith knows exactly how to make this work. And we know he does, because he just gave Aaron Rodgers 3 legitimate NFL tight ends. Okay. He's got Freiermuth, he's got Darnell Washington, and now he's got Jonnu Smith. What else does Rodgers need? I'm a little skittish on the Caleb Johnson, Jalen Warren running back scenario, because I'm just used to seeing a hell of a lot more horsepower with the Steelers running back situation. But I'll believe one of two things. They're going to make that work, or they're going to add in bulk off of the waiver market after training camp to make sure that they're more than steady for 17, 18 weeks in the regular season. Cause that's an easy fix. You know how that works. You can find somebody week 6, week 7 off the street if you need to fill that gap, unfortunately, for that position. But I'm with you. I'm pretty damn confident about the 2025 outlook, and I'm super intrigued about what happens next offseason with this roster, because if this roster looks good with Rodgers, and Rodgers is going to retire, what the hell is next? they're going to throw, the number 33 pick or something like that, the number 37 pick on the field week 1 of 2026. So this team is just must see for me right now for the next at least 18 months. And then we'll see what kind of kickback we get. But TJ Watt locking in here makes obviously a ton of sense for a lot of reasons. But the biggest reason being they're telling us out loud that they think they're a contender right now. So we might as well just listen. What does it mean for the Bengals? Because that's the obvious translation here. The Shamar Stewart stuff's not getting any better. He's not going to show up to camp this week, okay? Because he's not even close on this contract unless agent and negotiators. By the way, the whole front office in Cincinnati is being restructured, and this is a part of it. Let's be honest. But you're going to have 72 hours here of just absolute bludgeoning between Shamar Stewart and Trey Hendrickson to get everything figured out, because they have no edge rush right now in Cincinnati. None. Okay. They're going to have to throw the B's and C's out there for camp and hope that they can get this thing done. And that's excellent news for Aaron Rodgers and excellent news for Lamar Jackson. And you know how this works. So with that said, everything else about Cincinnati has made a ton of sense this offseason. They were market value on T. Higgins. They were where they needed to go on Jamar Chase because they waited, right? So you ended up where you ended up because of the timeline. So where do we see this go? Are they going to continue to play hardball? Because Trey Hendrickson's not going to show up, Dan. He's going to hold out. He's going to take his fines. He's going to risk preseason salaries. He's going to risk regular season salaries. All right. He's going to play that game that Chris Jones played in Kansas City and sort of hope that he gets himself to one more great contract. And that contract, and I know there's a lot of people that don't believe this, it's going to have to look and smell like this TJ Watt deal now, right? Because they waited.
Yeah. Brutal defense.
When you're older, yeah, I get it. He doesn't have the aura of TJ Watt. But he does have the production. He's got that. I mean, the numbers pop off the page at you. Any other organization would have paid this guy 18 to 24 months ago. They haven't, but it's going to have to look like that. Why would he take anything less than 75% of that? Let's put it that way. If it's 3 for 100, I'm not sure that's enough, but I guess we're talking at that point, right?
Well, I would think so, yeah. And I know everything's been doom or gloom here, but I mean, it was not unlike that with T. Higgins, and then that got done right. So maybe there is some hope. But my question would be, why do they do this with every player?
Yeah.
I mean, at some point that catches up to you from a likability negotiation standpoint, in my opinion. But defense was bad last year. If without those two pieces, could be worse this year, believe it or not. And if so, in my opinion, you just push your chips in on offense and pray on defense, right? So if they can improve somewhere, if that's adding another depth piece there, I mean, what else are you going to do, right? Maybe I'm way off on that. Everything settles and all the pieces fall into place. Shamar Stewart reports, Hendrickson deal gets done, or a trade happens, however you want to look at that. But that's my 2 cents.
I use the website Our Lads a lot, especially for the depth chart work they do, which is really outstanding because they sort of really paint a broader picture with the depth chart for the NFL rosters. And one of the things they do, Dan, is they quickly color code any new players on the depth chart, right? So players that were drafted, players that were acquired via trade or free agency, any new players. So it's really easy as I go through my offseason recaps right now to quickly see how much of the projected starting lineup has been essentially changed or added or acquired this offseason alone. And when I go to the Bengals right now, it's only 2 defensive players and 2 offensive players, and none of them are like standout additions, right? By any regards. It's a 2nd-round draft pick, Demetrius Knight, who's going to play the will linebacker spot, and I think is going to outplay Oren Burks this offseason, but that's not a slam dunk. And then it's an undrafted defensive tackle in TJ Slayton, and that's it. Okay. Now that might change if Henderson and Shamar Stewart aren't there or available, but they didn't go out and upgrade this defense that everybody in the world knows has been subpar despite Joe Burrow and superstars on the offensive side of the ball. They didn't do that. Okay. So you can clearly see what they have done and haven't done over the past couple of off seasons with sites like Our Lads. And I can tell you right now that that hope and a prayer that you're throwing out there is exactly how the front office is operating right now. They're just hoping that they've hit somewhere on a 4th round pick, or that Shamar Stewart magically shows up and has a 12-sack, rookie campaign. Because other than that, it's going to look a lot like it's looked before, which has been fine, but this ain't a playoff team right now because it wasn't last year. And you can blame Joe Burrow's injuries, and that's a big part of it. But roster construction is also a big part of it. And I think that at some point in time, the rooster's going to come home to crow on this whole situation because of exactly what you're asking the question, which is why? Why do they wait? Why do they do this? Why aren't they doing this? It just seems like, they're putting drops of water out there where at some point in time, you got to throw a bucket at this thing, and have the big risky conversation and try to go win a freaking Super Bowl. Cause that's not what the roster construction is saying is happening in Cincinnati right now. All right. I'm going to push the future extension conversation for my next show, because I got a lot of players who I think are still going to get paid. But the ones that the sort of cause and effect ones, I think there are going to be the Trey Hendricksons of the world here with TJ Watt, and Trent McDuffie, who should see a nice payday as the last cornerback on the list, right? Because Stingley Jr. and Sauce Gardner and Christian Benford and a few others have now been locked in. J.C. Horn have taken this thing to the next level, and McDuffie is right there in this conversation. And by the way, he's going to be the last Chiefs extension too, because Karlaftis and Trey Smith and these players have already been locked in. So there's plenty more NFL money to come here, especially as camp breaks. But we'll table that conversation for when things get a little bit closer. 2 more things on the dock, and then we'll get out of here today, Dan. I know you're not a big golf guy, but did you watch the final Open of the year, the Open Championship, and see Scottie Scheffler run away with this thing?
I was following it from afar. I didn't get to tune in this weekend, though.
It's all right. He's the man. He's been the man for 2 years, and it's getting a little bit boring for some people at times because he ran away with this one despite the elements. And a pretty good showing from players who generally do well in these links type courses. Scheffler has not done well in the past across the pond here, and man, he just showed up and basically FU'd the competition for 4 straight days. After, by the way, starting the whole week with a press conference that was somewhat polarizing, basically saying, the wins are fine, but they don't do much for me, right? Because I got a kid and I got a family, and life just sort of operates in rotation. And if it comes with wins on the course, that's great, but it's not how I sort of operate. He sort of ran that back a little bit yesterday after he won that Claret Judd. But man, when this guy just sort of turns the world off around him, he's unbeatable. There's a Tim Duncan to him. There's a little bit of, the Max Scherzers of the world who can just say, I'm on this mound and nothing else exists at times. And certainly we saw Tiger do that over the course of the past couple of decades. But this is kind of rarefied air. And obviously the money is starting to catch up. He wins himself a little bit over $3 million yesterday for the Open Championship. He's now got 3 of the 4 major legs, which means he will start next year seeking that Grand Slam, all 4 majors. He will be one of the youngest to ever do it if he does it next year. And the career earnings have shot up to over $155 million when you include things like playoff bonuses and all that stuff. So he's well past his competition, and he's only 29 years old. So you can say he's boring. You can say that it's not must-see TV to watch Scottie Scheffler win tournaments anymore, but you're going to have to get used to it because it's not going away. He's just built differently. And when you've got other golfers going to their press conferences after tournaments saying, we just are all playing for second and we know it, and we come into Thursday knowing that, when we see, I heard somebody this weekend say, I think it was Shane Lowry, who it was actually his hometown course there in Northern Ireland. He had a practice round with Scottie Scheffler on Wednesday or Tuesday, and Scottie Scheffler basically didn't talk to him the whole time. He just went out there and played golf and mastered the holes. And Shane Lowry left that course 2 days before the actual start of the tournament saying, well, we're all playing for second. We're done. Okay, this guy is on another planet right now, and he's already figured out every nuance of a course that I grew up playing. I lived right around the corner. There's a mural of Shane Lowry on one of the barns near this course. And the guy who basically owned the course played with the guy who won the tournament and knew it on Wednesday. That's how dialed in Scottie Scheffler was. So look, it ain't rocket science. Okay. When you're good and you can teach your brain to have that kind of mental capacity and mental focus, that's the recipe for bet on me every week, because I ain't going away. So there you go. There's your gambling tip for 2026. Dan. Scottie Scheffler is probably a good over throughout the course of any season here on forward. Let's finish with your neck of the woods. You've been following this MLB draft stuff. I know they've been flying in. When's the actual deadline, first of all, to get your players signed with these bonuses before they become an unsigned draft pick?
It's July 28th. I believe it's 5 p.m. Eastern.
Okay.
If you are following along and your team has not signed anyone yet, that's not surprising. Don't be shook by that. A lot of teams announce them all at once or very close together once they strategically lay out all of the puzzle pieces. So we'll be plugging those in on our draft tracker as always. Other than that, no huge surprises so far, I guess. So
yeah, I mean, there's been some pretty considerable under slots, as you let us know and anticipated. The top 2 picks way under slot, including an $8.2 million bonus for Eli Willits, the number 1 overall pick to Washington. Where does that kind of sit in the lure of number 1 overall picks, and was that pretty much what your expectations were coming into this thing?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit last time about how this was going to be an underslot situation. A lot of these guys at the top of the draft are, just because of the sheer money up top among the top 11 picks or so. Teams utilize that to take a little bit of savings typically when they can. So in terms of Eli Willits, he was the 1st overall pick, son of former player Reggie Willits. Not that has too much to do here, but regardless, he is the youngest player ever taken 1-1, and that $8.2 million signing bonus is a record for a high school player drafted at 1-1. He broke Jackson Holliday's record from a couple years ago by $10,000. So for anyone following sports financials, we all know how they just try to get that little bit more for the record. That's basically what happened here in a way. Also, something I'll circle back on, we talked about it a little bit last time, that medical 75% threshold. If a player is at the combine but does not get exchange medical information, they are not guaranteed. Sorry, I should just reverse that. If you share medical information at the combine, you're guaranteed 75% of your slot bonus. Eli Willits did not, which is reflected here. 8.2 is 74% of his slot his slot value. So just a little, typical angling there. They had to make sure that they got under that threshold to prove a point, I'm sure.
Is it still silly to ask if handing out the medicals would have gotten them more money?
Well, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, it's probably it's obviously more risky for pitchers, but it could tank your draft value, right? So he took. I mean, I don't want to draw too many straws here because it's still a really good signing bonus. Like I just said, record for a high school player drafted 1-1. I don't really have a problem with them going this route. I mean, he still got a massive bonus. If there is any concerns with the medical, I haven't heard that there are. I'm just saying hypothetically, he avoided anything that could really take his value. And again, just to drive this point home one more time, the money is at the top of the draft specifically. I mean, it's at the top couple rounds, but specifically at the top of the first round. So even if you're falling down into the late first round, it's a significant drop off from being first overall, right? So taking a haircut at first overall, I think he still played it fine without the medical information.
All right. So if you're following our draft tracker, and you're keeping up with it kind of minute to minute here, looks like the first actual slot signing was Miami's shortstop out of Oregon State. Is there any credence to why that number 7 overall pick went full slot value in your opinion? I know things kind of line up with the availability to go back to college, or if they're young and there's going to be like a holdout situation. Why specifically is that the first slot signing that we have?
That's sort of a fall there. I mean, like, some people had Ivar Arquette in the top 5. Some people thought maybe if this was still a Mike Rizzo led front office, that he was in play at 1-1 for Washington. That's probably a long shot. I'm just throwing a few things out there that I've heard that I've accumulated in the draft coverage I've listened to. So my guess there is it's just a good player that fell down the board a little bit. It's probably a signing bonus. A similar signing bonus to what he would have gotten if he was higher on the board too, is kind of my point. So he just fell a little bit to a point where the Marlins thought that they could take him there, and they got him right at slot. No savings, no penalty there for them. So.
All right, great work on the draft stuff. We're going to have to circle back to some of this trade deadline stuff, which is now 1 week away. And I think the buyer-seller situation has changed quite a bit over the course of the last month with this ridiculous run by Milwaukee, an absolute nosedive from the Mets and the Dodgers, respectively. Boston's sort of hanging in limbo. The Blue Jays are now clear-cut AL East contenders and leading the division, and playing the Yankees this week could really give themselves some distance there. There's some really fun storylines heading into this big week of baseball. So we'll have to circle back here quickly in the next couple of days and get on that. But great work so far, Dan.
Awesome, Mike. Thanks.